Hello everyone, I welcome you all to ePathshala on Doppler in Obstetrics. This is a virtual classroom initiative by NOGS. I am Dr. Neelam Chajed, consultant in fetal medicine, practicing at the New Life Fetal Medicine and Therapy Center in Nagpur. The objectives of today's presentation are to discuss the main indications of obstetric Doppler, which is surveillance of growth restricted babies and predicting preeclampsia. There are others such as monitoring of fetal anemia and monochorionic twin gestation, but for today's presentation I will limit myself to the first two. I will also discuss the methods of Doppler evaluation, which is by interrogating various arteries and veins. Then I will discuss how to interpret the results and the limitations of Doppler, and finally a brief note on ophthalmic artery Doppler, which is a recent advance in prediction of preeclampsia. So there are a few key concepts whenever we start doing Doppler examinations for a baby. The first thing is to decide whether this is a physiologically small baby or a pathological small baby. The best way to do so is to do serial abdominal circumference examination or serial expected fetal weight estimates. And a baby that is less than 10th centile but is following a normal growth curve and is having normal Dopplers will be a physiologically small baby and usually has good outcomes if there is no infectious background or a genetic cause of this smallness. And usually a 2-weekly growth and Doppler assessment is a standard practice in management of these fetuses. The second key concept is to distinguish between early onset IUGR and late onset IUGR. Any IUGR that begins before 28 to 30 weeks is classed as early IUGR, and the one that happens after 30 weeks is late IUGR. The problem with early IUGR is management because it is very risky and dangerous to deliver babies so early, and the problem with late IUGR is diagnosis because the Dopplers are usually normal. The main problem, however, is that immature fetuses usually have a higher tolerance to hypoxia compared to mature fetuses that have a lower tolerance, and hence a relatively bad outcome if the diagnosis is not made in time. It is similar to you and me at high mountain heights compared to Sherpa Tenzing, who will fare much better because he is used to those heights and low oxygen saturation levels. The third key concept is fetal circulation. So whenever we do Dopplers, the main aim is to understand the relationship and the fine play between the pump and the receiver. So the pump is the fetal heart and receiver is the placenta, and pipes are the small conduits that connect with these two organs. So when we do Dopplers, we try and understand how the receiver and the pump are behaving in relation to each other. The way we do this is by doing Doppler of various arteries and veins. The main ones are uterine artery, umbilical artery, middle cerebral artery, the cerebroplacental ratio of umbilical to middle cerebral artery, aortic isthmus Doppler, and ductus venosus. We also use biophysical profile along with Dopplers to better understand the fetal pathology and physiology, and computerized CTG. So the first vessel for doing Dopplers tends to be the uterine arteries. This is the only vessel we tend to measure in all 3 trimesters, and a mean of the left and right uterine artery is measured. Notch is a characteristic of uterine artery, and it is normal in non-pregnant status and also during early first trimester. Impedance to the blood flow decreases progressively throughout pregnancy in the uterine artery, and hence an increased resistance in first trimester is a predictive of preeclampsia in future. Interventions are available to act on early information given by this artery, and that is starting of aspirin 150 milligrams at bedtime as suggested by the Aspiri trial, which suggests that the incidence of late onset preeclampsia can almost be halved by doing so. These are the spectral waveforms of normal and abnormal uterine artery, especially in the late second and third trimester. In the early trimesters, there is reduced end diastolic flow versus late trimester where there is increased end diastolic flow due to reduced impedance, which is normal. The second artery that we interrogate is the umbilical artery, and this is measured in the free loop of cord because the resistance tends to be different at the fetal end and the placental end, and hence the maximum studies that have been done are in the free loop of cord. In umbilical artery also, the pulsatility index decreases with increasing gestation. Here again there are spectral waveforms of normal and umbilical artery Doppler. So this is during very early gestations where there is reduced end diastolic flow within the artery, and it gradually and progressively increases and is almost half the systole. So umbilical artery waveforms can be classified in three different patterns. One is reduced end diastolic flow, the second is absent end diastolic flow, and the third is reversed end diastolic flow. It has been said that abnormal umbilical artery Doppler appears when at least 60% of the placental vascular bed is obliterated. Till then probably we may not see any features. And reversed end diastolic flow is seen when more than 70% of placental bed is diseased. So the absent flow is anywhere between 60 to 70% of placental pathology. The average time interval between the onset of abnormal umbilical artery Doppler and the onset of late decelerations is about 2 weeks, but it may be shorter in patients with hypertensive disease. Absent or reversed end diastolic flow is associated with severe IUGR and oligohydramnios, and it increases the risk of neonatal morbidity and mortality both, including complications such as cerebral hemorrhage, anemia, and hypoglycemia. The third artery that we look at is the middle cerebral artery. This is a high resistance bed in contrast to the previous two vessels that I spoke of. Here the pipe, as we have discussed, is the middle cerebral artery and the pump is the left ventricle. The pulsatility index decreases with advancing gestation but is never less than the 5th percentile. And brain sparing effect is when there is increased blood supply to the brain vascular bed in cases where the supply to the brain is increased. So the fetus shows two types of responses whenever it is challenged with placental disease. The first one is due to reduced nutrition and oxygenation. The blood flow gets redistributed and it is preferentially shunted towards more vital organs such as heart, brain and adrenals, and decreased blood flow goes to the less vital organs such as liver, skin, kidney and gut. Hence we start seeing reduced liver span and abdominal circumference. The expected fetal weight reduces and we start seeing echogenic bowel. So this is early adaptation. In early adaptation, the brain gets more preferential blood supply, which is seen as cerebral distribution, and increased diastolic flow in the middle cerebral artery. And reduced blood flow, as I have already discussed, presents in the form of IUGR with reduced abdominal circumference and reducing AFI, and which is suggestive of reduced blood flow to the kidneys and renal perfusion, and necrotizing enterocolitis or echogenic bowels. The first and the earliest predictor of reduced blood supply to the baby is altered cerebroplacental ratio. So there can be instances where we may have a normal umbilical artery Doppler and a normal MCA, but the ratio between umbilical artery and the MCA can be abnormal, and that is a predictor for onset of placental disease and bad outcomes. So in normal pregnancies, the CPR should always be more than 1. A CPR which is less than 1 means that the blood flow redistribution is increasing and progressively will lead to poorer outcomes. Then comes the late adaptation. So at a stage where the fetus is not able to accommodate the reduced blood supply, the blood flow will start showing reversal, absence in the first place and then reversal, and alongside the ductus venosus pulsatility index will increase and the aortic isthmus will also start showing reversal. So the fourth vessel that we look at is the aortic isthmus. It is a section of the aorta located between the origin of the left subclavian artery and the ductus arteriosus. It reflects a balance between the impedance of the brain and systemic circulation. Elevation or reversal of flow precedes abnormalities in the ductus venosus and often approximately by 1 week. So this is the best vessel where we need time, say for example, to give steroids and decide whether we need to deliver the baby or not. So aortic isthmus gives an idea whether we can wait for steroids, action of steroids or not, and an abnormal aortic isthmus is associated with adverse perinatal outcomes. These are the bottom one are the few waveforms of aortic isthmus. So the first waveform is the normal waveform where there is reduced end diastolic flow. Then in the second waveform, reversal has begun, and in the third one there is complete reversal of flow through the aortic isthmus, which is a predictor of poor outcomes. The last vessel that we interrogate is ductus venosus, and it is the last vessel to be affected in fetal hypoxia and also the only vessel to have forward flow throughout the gestational age of a fetus. Changes in ductus venosus or reversal in ductus venosus predict poor outcomes in the fetus along with suboptimal neurodevelopment. These are the spectral waveforms depicting normal, increased vascular resistance, reversal of flow, and then finally the pulsatility of the umbilical vein. So the late adaptation is when fetus starts showing pulsatility in the umbilical vein, and it is an ominous sign suggesting fetal death in few hours. The apparent temporal sequence of progression in growth restricted fetus is as follows. So the first thing that happens is there is elevated umbilical artery Dopplers or reduced diastolic fill. The middle cerebral artery starts showing redistribution with brain sparing effect, and in the meanwhile the CPR becomes abnormal. After that, the umbilical artery starts showing absent end diastolic flow followed by reversal. The aortic isthmus and the ductus venosus start showing elevated pulsatility index followed by the reversal of A wave in ductus venosus. Then the umbilical vein starts showing double pulsations or triple pulsations, and then the CTG and biophysical profile starts becoming abnormal. Finally, it will culminate into fetal acidemia and stillbirth. So how do we interpret these results? There is a very stage-based protocol which has been suggested by the Fetal Medicine Unit in Barcelona, and this is a very good protocol which has really helped institutions in reducing both maternal and fetal morbidity and mortality, and it is classified into 4 main stages, and each stage has a different management and protocol for follow-up. So the first stage is where the expected fetal weight is less than 3rd centile. The umbilical artery PI is more than 95th centile. The MCA PI is less than 5th centile, or the cerebroplacental ratio is altered and is less than 5th centile, or the uterine artery PI is more than 95th centile. When the fetus is classified as having stage 1 placental disease, we offer weekly monitoring and biophysical profile, and gestational age at delivery should be approximately around 37 weeks. Mode of delivery could be normal by doing labor induction if the patient doesn't spontaneously go in labor. There is no specific indication for cesarean section. Stage 2 indicates severe placental insufficiency, and any of the 2 criteria, if present, are taken as stage 2. The first one is absent end diastolic flow in the umbilical artery or reversal flow in the aortic isthmus. In this scenario, we offer admission to the patient. We do bi-weekly monitoring if it is very small baby less than 28 weeks, and we aim at delivery at 34 weeks by cesarean section. If it progresses and goes on to stage 3, then we start having suspicion of fetal acidosis, but the suspicion is low, and the criteria for identifying stage 3 is reversal of flow in the umbilical artery or the ductus venosus pulsatility index of more than 95th percentile. In these cases, we offer admission to the patients, do monitoring once or twice daily by CTG and biophysical profile. The gestational age for these babies should be between 30 to 32 weeks depending on the steroid dose and CTG abnormalities, and the mode of delivery is LSCS. The fourth stage is an ominous stage with high suspicion of fetal acidosis. There is reversal of flow in the ductus venosus. The CTG shows reduced variability and fetal heart shows deceleration. In these cases, admission and delivery should be as early as possible, probably within the 12 hours of admission if we are waiting for steroid doses. The gestational age of delivery, if it is more than 26 weeks, should be considered to be delivered by LSCS. Finally, the last and a brief note on the recent advances in prediction of preeclampsia is the ophthalmic artery Doppler. The maternal ophthalmic artery is an easily accessible vessel for Doppler assessment that provides information on less accessible intracranial circulation, and a lot of studies have been done and they are in process of getting validated. There is extensive evidence that suggests that in pregnancy with preeclampsia, there is a decrease in the impedance to flow and an increase in flow velocity in the ophthalmic arteries. So what we do is we measure the peak systolic velocity ratio, which is the ratio of second peak of the systolic velocity to the first peak of the systolic velocity. So the first peak is here. We take a velocity, which in this case is roughly about 35. The second peak is here. So we take a velocity which is roughly 15 and we will put a ratio of the peak systolic velocity. Ophthalmic artery PSV ratio tends to be significantly increased in pregnancies with preeclampsia and could be a good method of identifying those pregnant patients who are at high risk of late onset preeclampsias. Ophthalmic artery PSV ratio at 19 to 23 weeks gestation, both on its own and in combination with other biomarkers, is a potentially useful vessel for prediction of subsequent development of preeclampsia, especially in preterm preeclampsia, and larger studies are needed to validate this finding. So finally, should we do a Doppler or not for IUGR babies? Yes, of course, it is the gold standard. It helps in diagnosing the type of IUGR in early mid-trimester. It helps in prognosticating and deciding the time of follow-up, and it helps in planning correct time of delivery to prevent further morbidity and mortality. So in summary, we should identify a small 4-date fetus versus a growth-restricted fetus, distinguish between early and late IUGR, follow objective stage-based protocols, do biophysical score and CTG as adjuncts and not as primary tools, and follow a teamwork and have a teamwork to optimize the fetal outcomes such as counseling of parents, NICU care, and neonatologist and theatre staff. Thank you.